Let's start first on the Republican exploitation of religion and religious fervor. We'll bring in author and activist Dan Savage. Dan, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Congresswoman Bachmann first. We might say she picked up where previous Republican zealots left off, except that some of her utterances seem exponentially more bizarre and even random. Is there some sort of machine generating these remarks, or is there actually a person there?
There's actually a person there, and that person is a big problem for the Republican Party, and she's symbolic of an even bigger problem for the Republican Party. They began 20, 30 years ago pandering to the religious right, and the religious right realized that it could just run its own candidates, elect its own people, and put the nuts in charge, and that's what they've done. Michelle Bachmann is a religious extremist and a nut, and she's the kind of person who once upon a time the Republicans could count on her vote and her support for saner, more middle-of-the-road Republican candidates who could work with Democrats and who weren't bat crap crazy. And now she's the one who's in there, and they're stuck with her and her extremism.
So she hears voices and wrestles snakes and that sort of end of the spectrum here, you know, because even in that area, I would think...
And she sees every political dispute as this battle between good and evil, as some sort of apocalypse, and just ratchets up the rhetoric. We've seen her do it on, you know, in 2008 when she called for an investigation into the anti-American attitudes of members of Congress, and all of her extreme remarks during the health care debate and the cap and trade debate. The last time she was talking about letting blood in a political battle, it was the lock and load and armed and dangerous argument she was making about greenhouse gas emissions. She's nuts.
Well, yeah, but you wonder how many people are going to follow her in this let's all slit our wrists together idea. And another thing, in a broader sense...
I think if they want to show their commitment, they should start with their throats.
We'll just pass on that. How do they twist the idea of, say, just to pick a figure out of the hat here, Jesus Christ and, you know, the golden rule and taking care, particularly the sick, and turn this into opposition to health care? In a sense, if they're trying to emulate Christ, if they can't personally heal disease in passersby, should they not be willing to help doctors to do so?
I'm sure they don't want to hear this from me because I'm an avowed atheist, but my dad was a Roman Catholic deacon and my mom was a lay minister, and I went to the seminary and I was confirmed in the Catholic Church. I've read the Bible backwards and forwards, and a lot in there, a lot that Jesus had to say about taking care of the sick, housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, visiting, not executing the prisoner, and nothing about capital gains tax cuts, nothing about denying health care coverage to American families and American children, and nothing about this sort of insane opposition to a democratically elected president. They really have hijacked Christianity and are giving it a bad name. The reason we see spikes, I think, in more and more people who no longer associate themselves with any religious faith or belief is because now to say you're Christian in America means you're saying I am in the same boat, the same bat crap crazy boat with Michelle Bachmann, and a lot of even nominal Christians don't want to say that anymore. Cultural Christians don't want to say that anymore.
Strip the religion out of it and stick to the ethics of religion, which is often very useful even to people who don't believe. And we don't know if anybody who booed the late Senator Kennedy at the Schakowsky town hall belonged to the religious far right. But I mean, I got heat for saying that Ronald Reagan is dead and he was a lousy president. And I waited for 4 or 5 years until he died to say it that bluntly, just out of respect for the dead. Haven't the ethics of these folks, the religious and the non-religious alike, in this opposition just been all over the map?
Well, when you have a party that claims to speak for God or claims that God is on its side, the rhetoric heats up and the anger heats up because it's not just a battle about ideas and positions and what's good for the country and bad for the country. It's a battle about what God wants and what God doesn't want, and it's easier to demagogue about your enemies and to despise them and to dehumanize them in this really personal and vicious way, and the religious right is fomenting this kind of hatred in this country, and at our peril. I really do think that the Michelle Bachmanns of the world and the Glenn Becks of the world are actively and consciously or subconsciously trying to get, I'm just going to say it, trying to get the president killed. That's why they're setting this up as kill or be killed arguments. He's going to kill your grandma, pull the plug on grandma, death panels that little children have to go in front of. This kind of rhetoric, this paranoid style on the religious right, from, you know, birchers to birthers, doesn't usually end well. And somebody's got to put the brakes on it. Unfortunately, the Republican Party, there are no adults left in the room. There are only the Michelle Bachmanns and the Glenn Becks and the Rush Limbaughs running the show.